2022, we have once again seen the return of war to Europe, a continent ravaged and haunted by destruction and conflict in the past, once a distant memory but now back to an everyday reality. We are seeing once major global superpowers struck with uncertainty as a lack of energy is leading to a winter of chaos. Also uncertainty in global finance as we've seen the lowering of GDP forecasts for the major economies of the world. For instance, in regards to China, analysts have been steadily downgrading forecasts for China's growth this year and next, as the outlook for the economy is overshadowed by lockdowns, a persistent property crisis, and slowing exports. This will be the first time in more than 3 decades that the rest of developing Asia will grow faster than China, a recent report stated. Likewise, in America, forecasts have been slashed as the US lingers perilously close to a major recession. Recession and depression is a major theme across global politics at this moment. The impact of inflation has been destroying many states across the world. Earlier this year, Turkey's inflation rose to close to 80%, hitting the highest level in 24 years. Such inflation has hit Turkey's 84 million inhabitants hard, with high energy and food prices and a crash in the Turkish lira. We're seeing Sri Lanka's economy collapse. Sri Lanka's economy shrank the most in 2 years amid a debt crisis that triggered a default and widespread protests that brought the nation to a standstill. Sri Lanka's 81 billion economy collapsed after fuel supplies ran dry because of a financial crisis. The economic meltdown, the most dire in its history, spiraled into political chaos that led to the formation of a new government. And of course, no one can ignore the frozen bank withdrawals in both China and Lebanon, which have caused major civil unrest with thousands of protests. This has resulted in the temporary closure of banks in Lebanon. With Russia and China showing increased military aggression, the world once again finds itself in a very dangerous situation. So why are we seeing such an uncertain global political environment filled with war, uncertainty, and social unrest? For decades, international relations theorists have provided optimism to global politics, that the major global political players could enjoy a relatively peaceful world order short of armed conflict. Realist theories contended that for decades during the Cold War, the polar world environment, dominated by the Soviet Union and the United States, and now the unipolar world dominated by the US, prevented any wars of miscalculation. Adding nuclear weapons added an extra protective layer due to the principles of mutually assured destruction. Liberal thinking contended that certain variables, such as institutions, partnerships, and democracy, aided in cooperation and as such prevented conflict. The onset of the United Nations and the Non-Proliferation Treaty are a couple examples of that, assisted in a very peaceful world environment. At the same time, constructivists have explained how the changing of norms, ideas, and identities have facilitated a peaceful world order, as we are no longer struck in the past of norms of slavery, torture, and wars, which were a common theme in the past. Unfortunately, nearly all forces seem to be unraveling before our eyes. The major driving forces of international politics suggest that the new Cold War among the United States, China, and Russia is unlikely to be peaceful. Many argue that we are entering a multipolar world environment. Realist thinking in international relations argue that multipolar systems are unstable and prone to major wars of miscalculation, the most prominent example being World War I. Multipolar world systems are dangerous because the traditional balance of power in a bipolar world order is skewed. Multiple adversaries cause a potential uncertain and a dangerous scenario. Of course, at this moment, the US is the world's leading power, China being the major global superpower in second place, mostly due to its financial dominance. An aggressive Russia, as we have seen this year, which has the largest nuclear stockpile in the world, cannot be discounted from this discussion. Although its global standing during the Cold War is now in the past, Vladimir Putin has threatened to use the weapons of mass destruction. This comes on the back of now ordering an extra 300,000 reserve military personnel to fight on the front line of the Ukraine war. Although Russia is not as much of a global superpower as it once was, the presence of nuclear weapons and its aggressive nature make it a very important subject to global politics in 2022. This brings us to the next subject of the special relationship between Russia and China and what this means for global politics. Deepening military and diplomatic ties between Russia and China is worrying US policymakers. Both states have shown military aggression in recent months. Recently, President Xi described Putin as his best friend and colleague. A senior defense official said, "Our sense is that China is paying close attention to what's going on, as they did initially with things in Ukraine. This, of course, is in relation to its desire to invade Taiwan." Elbridge Colby, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense during the Trump administration, says it best. "You face a two-front war, where we don't have a two-front military. If NATO is expecting the US forces to bail it out simultaneously while a fight over Taiwan, we can't do them both. We don't have the assets. That can create a huge problem for us." We have seen China's aggression toward Taiwan. Just the last few weeks, we have seen China conduct military drills around the island of Taiwan. The exercises were Beijing's most provocative since at least 1995, when it fired 6 missiles into the sea over several days following a US visit. This is very important as China, which bases its foreign policy upon the values of peaceful coexistence, showing military aggression not seen in nearly 30 years. The military ties between Russia and China are getting much closer. In 2018, as part of the Vostok exercise, thousands of Chinese People Liberation Army troops took part in Russian military exercises. Additionally, the two states have cooperated together in developing a missile attack early warning system. Even just last month, the two states participated in a joint military exercise. They have not entered a formal defense agreement. However, their partnership is characterized by a marriage of convenience. It's a well-calculated partnership, clearly designed to push back against the US. By all means, this relationship is not perfect. However, just a couple of weeks ago, Putin indicated that China and Russia were intent on creating an alternative to the US-based rules international order. Putin said that, "We jointly stand to the formation of a just, democratic and multipolar world order based on international law and the central role of the United Nations and not on some rules someone has come up with and isn't trying to impose on others." No one really knows what is meant by that. However, it's clear that Putin strongly opposes the current dominance of the US in global politics. Record inflation, political instability, war back in Europe, and increased Chinese aggression are all key phrases and words we have heard in 2022. We are now entering a period in which a military conflict between the major global superpowers is a real possibility, hence acknowledging the realist thinking in international politics. We are definitely facing the most dangerous time for nuclear conflicts since the Cold War. The military relationship between China and Russia will prove a real challenge to the US.